I quit my job for about a year, was doing the freelancing like I talked about, knew that I didn't want that path. And at that point, I decided I would just do the opposite of everything I did in my 20s. So over the next 4 months, I sold all my stuff in the US. I moved out of my Boston apartment, booked a flight, and put all my possessions in 1.5 suitcases and basically came to Taiwan without a plan. When I had visited Taiwan that April, I had matched with my wife on Tinder.
Hello， 大家好，我是查理，欢迎收听查理的创业化合物。这是一个创业访谈与自我成长的频道。如果你想每周听一位创业家分享创业干货，提升认知边界，记得订阅哦。那么现在呢，开了自己赖社群，所以欢迎大家可以点选节目的资讯栏入群，跟我们一起来交流。那今天呢，非常的荣幸啊，我们要来做英文访谈了，就是也是我们今年的目标之一。所以我们先欢迎我们今天的大来宾——无路之路的作者 Paul Miller。
Thank you.
那Paul 呢，我觉得真的是一个非常特别，而且经历非常丰富的，因为他过往的背景呢，念了麻省理工之后进到了麦肯锡，然后在麦肯锡也当管顾当了好一阵子，然后到那时候的年薪高达了20万美金，换算下来就是600多万的台币，所以在世俗眼里呢，应该是人人称羡的一个梦幻职业。但他后来呢，因为可能家里发生了一些事情，然后自己生理也出现了一点健康的危机，然后才发现说，其实如果人生只剩工作，应该不是我们要追求的，所以后面也是辗转之下呢，诞生了《无路之路》这本书。所以从原本是一个世俗眼里的一个人生胜利组，但后来就发现说，他应该要探索到底，去走了一个很梦幻而且充满未知的这条道路上。然后后来就是离开了这个工作呢，然后就到了台湾。然后我觉得中间有很大一段故事，我们等一下再来聊。然后还遇到了在台湾的妻子，然后并且呢在台湾结婚生小孩，然后定居在台湾。然后他后来也出了这个《无路之路》嘛，2025非常知名的畅销书，因为他打破了原本大家对于这个成功的定义。对，因为原本我们的成功就是要让别人眼里认为我很成功，对，但是他其实 Paul 一开始也是这样想，但后来定义的成功呢，就把关系啦、健康啦，然后事业反而是在最后，对，所以这一段经历的过程呢，就会让这个曲折离奇，我觉得也非常的值得大家来探讨说，到底我们眼里的定义的成功，到底是我们自己定义的，还是要别人来帮我们定义？然后会有这次的合作呢，是因为 Paul 跟 PPA 合作，即将要上架他的新的线上课程，打开无路之路4阶段升级策略思维，对，然后一样老样子，我们最后会有再折扣码给大家。那先介绍 Paul 到这边，然后因为今天这个访谈呢也是比较特别，就是我会用中文来问问题，那 Paul 呢会用英文来回答，所以大家可以考验一下中文跟英文听力的这个理解程度。那如果大家想要完整的理解呢，那也建议大家可以到 YouTube 来看这一集的内容，因为我们会有完整的中英文的对照字幕，那来让大家更容易的理解 Paul 的这个丰功伟业跟他这一路以来的这个背景。那先介绍到这边，不晓得 Paul 有没有什么其他要补充自我介绍的呢？
I'm Paul Millard. My background, as Charlie covered already, worked 10 years in the corporate world in strategy consulting, worked for a bunch of firms like McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group. I think for me, early on in my career, I was so sort of narrowly focused on achievement. I wanted to get ahead. I wanted to work for the best companies and best firms. Luckily for me, strategy consulting was actually a really good fit for how I'm wired. I love to make sense of information, make sense of ideas, and I loved it early on. I loved being pushed, being challenged, working at a much faster pace than I'd ever been in like school, just trying to like get A's and get by, or in the workplace, just trying to finish tasks. So I fell in love with that. I think over the years, my motivation to continue on that path declined a lot over 10 years, mostly because I became good at the work. And to grow, to make more money, you have to sell client projects and care about many different clients. I didn't really want to do that. I just wanted to keep doing the work. So quitting was basically a way of sort of reinventing my path around work that was similar, to be honest. A lot of the writing I do is very similar to the consulting sense-making sort of work I always did, and doing it on my terms, combined with like this, I have this deep desire for freedom and I want to have so much time and control over my days. So I think that increasingly resonates with a lot of people, and I think the course kind of pairs well with this approach to carving your own path because it helps people gain the confidence to do work on their own terms.
所以其实从 Paul 的背景我们会知道说他就是非常努力工作，然后一直想要就是证明自己，然后一直拿到很好的成就。那当然过去在这10年在麦肯锡也有非常好的一些经验嘛。那后来是什么原因让你决定从麦肯锡离开，然后就开始去探索自我的这一段旅程呢？
When I quit, it wasn't like I was running or jumping towards something better or bigger or trying to make more money. Really, at the end, I had run out of steam. What happened to me is I always had this insatiable thirst for learning. I always had to be learning new things. And consulting was great for that, especially at the beginning. But even in consulting, I'd be in a job for a year and I'd get this hunger again. I need to go learn more. I need to start over. I want to be a beginner. And you do that enough times in formal employment and nobody will hire you because they know you're just going to quit after a year. And so I literally just ran out of moves. I kept applying for new jobs. I had 5 jobs in 10 years, including some internships in grad school as well. And so for me, I still had this desire and hunger, and everyone was telling me, no, you just need to stay in the role. You need to just wait your turn. You need to put in the hours. And I just wanted to keep moving. I think what I found after I quit my job was, oh, this is actually something very natural for being an entrepreneur or working on your own, constantly trying new things. It's just, oh, that's how you make it work. Versus when I was employed, that was not good. Why can't you just do the same thing over and over again? Why can't you keep doing what we want you to do or just stay in your job? Things like that.
后面会自己出来是因为也是想要拥抱这些未知嘛。那离开之后 Paul 的工作变成是可能很多是自由接案，那到底实际后来离开这种高薪的工作到稳定接案赚钱这一段过程，你是怎么样去转变心态跟找到各种可以赚钱或者体验尝试新事物的一些机会呢？
So I've never really had a stable salary. I think since working on my own, there's been higher odds of me earning at least some money every month, and that's gone up over time, though it's going back down a little. I mean, any entrepreneur knows it's always variable, changing. The kinds of things I'm getting paid for are changing. When I first quit, though, my idea was I want more freedom. I want to run away from employment. And the only thing I knew how to do was be a freelance consultant. So just a consultant with more flexibility and autonomy. I loved the autonomy and control over my work, but I found pretty quickly with the work for clients, I didn't love it. I could see I didn't want to keep doing that for 10 years, which was really challenging because that work pays so well. But I realized I didn't quit just to make more money or make the same amount of money. I wanted to actually find work I enjoyed. Find something that's sustainable, find something I could put all my energy in over a long period of time. And so there's a period of, oh crap, I need to make money. Then, oh wow, I'm making some money now. But then, oh crap, I can't sustain this. I'll burn out immediately and I'll have to quit this again. And so I would do short freelance projects and then sort of buy myself permission to experiment, to play, to create. I started a podcast in 2017. I started my blog in 2018. I started my first online course in 2018. None of those really took off. I mean, I'm still doing the podcast, but I started to come alive in a different direction. And so I was using freelancing to sort of fund that journey. And it was almost like my day job. My day job was like the freelance gigs, but I would constrain those to, okay, I'm going to do a project for a month. And then after that, I am definitely not going to look for freelance or paid work for a while and just experiment, go crazy, tap into getting to know myself, and then just keep doing that over and over again.
所以从接案，然后赚钱，然后又花很多时间探索，就是其他的兴趣或者其他的可能性。那这一段的这个心态的转折是怎么样让你很清楚知道你要的其实是自由，而不是就是当一个 employee 然后被限制住？因为尤其是那个机会成本很高嘛，因为可能对于 Paul 来说那是一个20万美金的薪水，但是你是如何真的意识到自由对你来说是更重要的，然后就是进而的就是尽管用接案薪水也不稳定，可是你有赚到钱了， 你还是要去一直探索到底有什么可能性。
When I quit my job, I was running away from work. I was burnt out. The final consulting job, I just wasn't a culture fit for the company. It wasn't what I was looking for. And I sort of could see the future that even if I stay in this career track, I might make money, it might be stable, but I'm going to just burn out even worse in the future. And so when I quit, it was like running away from that. I didn't have the mindset of, oh, I'm going to explore myself, get to know myself. What happened was I just got a lot more time and space. So even though I was freelancing, and even in those first couple of months when I didn't have work, I had a lot of time by myself. I'm wandering around, like you can only reach out to try and land freelance projects so many hours of the day, right? You can send emails for a couple hours, try to meet up with somebody, but you have a lot of time. And so I started writing. That helped me reflect and process and get to know myself. I would take long walks. I did some travel that helped me get out of my like default mode of being. And all these things started shaking me a little. I had two competing feelings at the time. One was I feel so ashamed for doing this. I feel like I'm wasting my career. I know people are disappointed in me. I'm scared about if I'm going to make money, but oh my God, this is so exciting. I'm getting to know myself. I'm getting in touch with this inner curiosity and drive and excitement for life. There's this sense of adventure. The unknown was scary, but also exciting because I didn't know what was on the other side of it. And I started to realize pretty quickly, this is like what I was missing. This is why I was job hopping all over. I was always looking to escape every job and move to the next thing. And I found out pretty quickly, I want to chase that feeling, even if it's scary, even if it's uncertain, even if I might run out of money. I want to chase that feeling and just see where it takes me.
所以其实在探索这个未知的过程是既害怕又兴奋的，但其实害怕会一直在发生，但是兴奋是你当下想掌握的。那我换个角度，就是因为我觉得这整段经历很充分的展现了一个，就是你原本定义的成功跟你后来定义的成功的不同。在做调查的时候 Paul 有讲到，就是原本你定义的成功是要让别人觉得你很成功，但你后来对于成功的定义就变成完全不同了。所以可不可以跟我们分享一下这个转折，然后以及你现在定义的成功是什么？
On my former path, I was very aware that others saw me as successful. When you go work for these kind of companies and get into a school like MIT, everyone thinks you're amazing. It's almost a little exhausting because you know you're just an imperfect human and you want people to see a bigger picture of you, but it's also awesome. When people think you're awesome, it feels really good. This is something people don't talk about. And when I quit my job, I felt a lot of that fade away. And I felt bad. Like I felt that gap. And there's two choices. One is try to reclaim that, or come up with my own definition and figure out how to be satisfied with that. And I think I chose that second path. The further you are on a path that is uniquely yours, which is inevitable if you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, you keep doing things that only you are doing over time. There's nothing you can do to compare yourself to others. You're just fighting against your own priorities and your time and your own constraints and your own like psychological limits. So one really interesting thing I've seen over and over again is that when people find a path that they want to stay on, they actually become much more excited about the people around them's success. So a lot of jealousy comes from people competing in scarce environments with like limited prizes, but also people being unhappy with their path. So if you're like being in a path where you're unhappy, but you're all competing for the same raise, everyone's like angry about people competing. But if you're thriving on your path and I see you succeeding or doing great things, that's amazing. I love it. It's because we're not really competitors. You're only competing against yourself.
所以自己探索出来一个属于自己的路，这个过程是其实你就没有竞争者了，你就可以成为你自己的无路之路。我不知道这样解读 O 不 OK？ 对，那我觉得这个是一个你自己人生一个非常非常关键的转折。那我额外一个好奇就是，因为你可以坦然现在去面对所有都是跟探索自我、跟自己对话，找到可能自己真正热爱、热情的事情。那以前的这整段世俗眼里第一的成功的经验，比如说在麦肯锡、BCG， 可能这10年的顾问公司，有哪些学习是你觉得可以让你走到这边，然后很受用，然后可以甚至也想要来分享给大家的一些技能？
I've been working on my own for 9 years. So I quit my job almost 9 years ago. I think the interesting thing that happens the longer I'm on this path is I sort of see how everything fits together. Now, the skills I loved as a consultant of taking lots of information, interviews, data, doing analysis, organizing it, coming up with a takeaway and insights and storylining and like bringing it together and mapping it to a worldview. That's literally how I write my books. And so writing my books is that same process. It's me paying attention to the world. It's talking to people. It's having conversations, doing research, pulling things together, and then telling a story in an interesting way. This also happens to involve a little more of my life story. Also, I think a couple things are really helpful. One thing I see in the creator world a lot is people LARPing. Do you know this term LARPing? LARPing is like live action role playing, where you're like role playing a position. You're sort of pretending to play the position. So you're sort of like pretending to be like an online creator or something like that. And so you do a lot of podcasts and like you're doing a lot of posts, but like you're making no money. Early on, I knew I wanted to be financially viable from day one. I didn't want to like spend a bunch of money to build an audience. I wanted to make money immediately by like freelancing or like selling stuff where I could do it. And like if I couldn't make money, I was just going to do it for fun. And so that sort of business thinking of like, okay, how do I think about budgeting my year, budgeting my runway, thinking about the trade-offs and different things like that was really helpful. I think finally, I take basically an experimental approach to life. And I'm always asking questions. In consulting, you have what's called a hypothesis-driven problem-solving method. And you have a problem, and then you come up with hypotheses. Hypotheses are just questions.
假说
And so the challenge, the problem I have is the problem everyone has is how do you spend your life? Right? So that question is not solvable. But in consulting, you're not trying to perfectly solve and answer a question or a hypothesis once and for all. You can never get to perfect, complete information in an uncertain world, even though many people want to. People they think they can get to certain answers. You can't. It's not possible. Our world's too chaotic. And you're looking to raise the odds of confidence in your decisions. So you come up with a question, you do research and analysis, and then you answer the hypothesis and you say, well, yes, that's valid. That's possible. And so it increases your odds that you can move in that direction. Or you come up with evidence that said that's not possible. So I could say, all right, I want to be a NBA player. My hypothesis is that I could join an NBA team in 1 month.
Not possible.
Well, I would still go through the process. So I do this quick in my head, but this is sort of the process you learn over and over again. So the question is, I can join an NBA team in 1 month. That's the question. My role as a researcher or like fact finder is to disprove that. And so I can pretty quickly just do some quick analysis and say, okay, the NBA has like 2 people over 40. I'm 41 already. And then you could do other work. Obviously, you don't need the analysis, but you could do the analysis and then say it's impossible. Another example could be, I could grow my audience on a podcast to 10,000 people. Now, that's probably doable. But we could structure hypotheses and questions underneath that to say, okay, if I partnered with big YouTubers and did 10 shows and really invested in those relationships, this could raise the odds that my channel would grow or head in a new trajectory. You could do a bunch of different research and say, okay, based on that, it's likely, but not like a foolproof method. Then you could have another bucket that could say, well, I could run paid ads. And I can do a bunch of research. Have other people done this? Does it work? Maybe. Then what you're doing is taking that information and you're getting to the insight. I cannot grow my channel to 10,000, or I can grow my channel to 10,000 or cannot based on your assessment of the info, because I can partner with YouTubers and I have those relationships already and I have the money to spend on ads. And so that would be my takeaway. That would be like the clear insight. And so this sort of thinking is happening all the time naturally in my head. And I think one thing that's resonated with people with my books is I don't think I realized early on how much is going on in my head of like me processing and synthesizing my own life and stuff. And I enjoy that too. And other people don't enjoy it. They're just like, I love reading your book because you do all the thinking for me. And then I can just apply that framework. And so, yeah, as you can tell, like I can just keep doing those sort of thought experiments. That's how my mind works. And that way of thinking mapped really well to consulting and is why I love teaching it too.
哇，我觉得这个假说思考的这一个算是顾问技巧，或者是这整套思考行为，其实就一直应用在 Paul 的日常，可能无时无刻。然后，但是这个东西，我觉得应该会让我们的决策变得相对的有效，或者是可以相对的提高我们决策的品质。但一般人是容易学习的吗？
So this is a really cool way to use AI. I'm so excited about this because one of the biggest challenges with teaching people these skills is you need to practice and you need feedback from other people on your thinking and your approach. But these frameworks are all out there. And I'm actually working on like developing a set of skills so I can like replicate me being this like strict person that would just be like, no, fine tune it, like change this wording, like think more deeply here. That has always been a frustration of mine because I can't clone myself infinitely and give people the feedback because it does take time. It does take reps, but this is something you can use AI for is take a framework you're trying to apply, like hypothesis-driven problem solving. Ask it, I want to use this, research the best sources. You can like even plug in my website and say, go research some of the basic articles from his website. I want to practice this. I want to use this to think about making a job change. Help me structure my thinking and then put it in like MECE buckets. That's another term from my course, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And you can have it teach you how to use these things. You sort of practice the moves. And the great thing about AI is it never gets tired.
Sure.
If you ask me 4 hours of questions, I'm going to be like, oh my God, please stop. I can't do this anymore. That is so exciting. It's so exciting for learning and practicing because then you can also say, okay, spin up a quiz for me and test me. I don't even think people realize the scale of like how to use these tools fully on this stuff yet. But yeah, it's a great time to do that.
所以其实现在有了 AI 之后，这些东西变得是相对的很容易，因为我们把这种思考的行为喂给 AI， 我就可以要它用这一套逻辑来帮助我解决问题。所以那我延伸很好奇，就是因为这个就是从 Paul 一直以来的思考行为嘛，那用这个模式在你的人生做过最有成就感的案子，或者是你自己最 enjoy 然后也获得巨大成功的案子，有没有一段这样子的经历或者是案例可以跟我们分享一下？
I can tell a funny one. I mean, so consultants have a reputation for overly applying these frameworks in their personal life. And so if you have kids, I don't know, do you have?
I don't have.
But when you have young kids, they're crying all the time and they can't communicate while they're crying. you often have like, oh, I think it's X. It's their teething or they didn't sleep well. At the end of the day, you don't know the answer. And so you're just hypothesizing. And so it often drives my wife crazy when I am like, okay, let's take a step back. We don't have enough evidence to know that it's the sleep or the teething. Let's try to think about this in a structured way. It could be the teething. It could be the sleep. It also could be an unknown category we haven't defined yet. And yeah, you can overly apply these things, but it can also be helpful in these environments to essentially in the business world and in life, you are trying to solve problems which may not have answers you can fully define, right? So there's a gap. The reason there's a problem is because there's a gap of like perfect answer to like your best possible answer is like here. And you're just trying to move up the stack by like eliminating hypotheses. So you could like open her mouth and be like, okay, there's no teeth in there. Teething is eliminated. But that raises the odds of the other hypotheses being true. So it raises your confidence level of that. And obviously you could see how you could take this way too far in a relationship or romantic relationship or dating. So yeah, fear discretion advised. And the big shift though is you're shifting from solution seeking to problem solving. So people will say all the time, the problem with the healthcare system is X. That is just solution seeking. You're looking for a once and final answer. You haven't actually even defined what you're solving first. And so you might define the problem, like in my daughter, of like, how do we get our daughter to not cry? And that may not be possible, but how could we relieve her suffering, right? Or in a business situation, how do we ensure we enter a new market profitably, right? And you're starting with that, and then you're withholding your tendency to like name the answer right away. Now, you might have judgment or experience in telling you what the answer might be, but going through the process teaches you over time that it's often a lot more fuzzy and unclear, and it helps you like structure thinking through that process.
哇，所以这一套系统不只用在商业上，任何的人生决策或者是日常看到的问题，都可以用这个有系统性的来帮我们解决问题。那也是因为这样子 Paul 才开了这堂新的课程嘛，对，然后也在 PPA 上面，所以可不可以先让 Paul 来帮我们介绍一下这堂课程具体会教大家哪些事情呢？
Yeah, so the core skills are a lot of what we've talked about. One of the big ones is shifting away from what I call like book report thinking, which is trying to prove in work or in other environments that you've done a lot of work. Everyone's been in an environment in which they sit in front of a presentation and the person is just trying to prove they did a lot of work. It's usually worthless. What do you need to know as the audience or the manager or the stakeholders and part of a project? You need to know what to do next. So it's really trying to nudge people in that direction of saying, we don't know the answer. You don't need to prove what you're doing, but go into your information and tell us, so what? Why does this information matter? How does it help us make better decisions? And what does it tell us about what to do next? The second thing is about processing information. So because of computers, we now take information in one window and then drop it in a PowerPoint slide or an email, and we don't tell people why it matters. You actually need to think before you PowerPoint. This is like one of the phrases I go back to over and over again. Think before you PowerPoint. And if you think about pre-computer time, what did you have to do to go do research and get information before you started writing? You had to go in a car or subway, go to a library, take out physical books, open them, find the right page, copy down information, go into other books over and over and over again. Then you have all these notes. Then what did you have to do next? Compile all your notes into a structured way of like writing. we're so lazy and we skip this because it's all just in like one window to another. We skip the thinking and processing way more in the digital world. And so we have so much information, but in almost every company I've ever worked with, nobody's saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's just shuffling information around. I call it information soup. And so that is one of the big things. And then the core thing, like a lot of people want is like, oh, how do I make great slides? The great slides start with all that. And so I teach how to make great slides at the end, because once you've figured out how to synthesize information, get to the so whats and structure your ideas, it's very easy to make great slides. And that's like something increasingly AI is doing too, which should we be grinding on slides and like trying to align boxes? Is that the best use? No, I think it's the thinking and the structuring and the synthesizing work anyway.
所以这堂课程它具体来说可能适合什么样子的人，然后大家学了之后可能会有哪些行为的改变，或者是决策品质的提升，可不可以跟我们分享一下？
The people that love this course are driven middle to senior managers working in companies with lots of data that are communicating ideas and messages to either customers, internal stakeholders, senior executives, or clients. And the big shift that I've seen over and over again is that people start seeing the role of themselves completely different. They see themselves, instead of being somebody that just is completing tasks, to in the active participation of like shaping the ideas and narratives of an organization. And so an organization or team or any group of people is a living organism of ideas and information and narratives. Most people, when they're in the middle and lower ranks of companies especially, mistakenly think that the top management team decides what the story is and then pushes it down to the team. Now that may happen, but that's not a well-run company. A lot of people realize is, oh, I can actually influence this message because I'm closer to the data. I'm in the flow with the customers every day. So I have a really good understanding of how the company is run. And so if you pair that with understanding how the company is thinking strategically, how the top leaders are talking, and start like mapping that up through like a bottom up and top down matching, you start to gain confidence. And once you develop that skill, you start to see, oh, this skill itself, communication, can fit in any kind of company. And it serves you well if you want to do your own thing as well.
所以其实这堂课我觉得很适合想要提升决策品质，然后当然老板可能可以透过这套系统，然后让可能公司往更好的地方走。那如果是在工作的同仁们，也可以因为这套系统，然后更接近，去换位思考，知道老板到底要什么，然后去让我们有更好的升迁或者是工作的机会。
Yeah, I think both of those groups are great. The best experiences I've seen is when teams take this together. And so I have assignments as part of it. And so when the teams are practicing the assignments and practicing that feedback and that iteration, everything I did with this course was designed so that people would quickly take the ideas and then practice it. Because as soon as you start practicing these things, it's way less simple than it seems. It's uncomfortable. It's a different way of working. And so what I found is that when people take this with coworkers or their managers or teams, they can start using the language and terms to give each other feedback. Hey, are you applying the pyramid principle on this information? What's the insight here? How do we get to that? Let's work through this. Let's do another revision, another practice round like that.
所以如果大家对于这堂课程有兴趣的话呢，就是可以再参考我们节目的资讯栏，因为这也是 PO 继出了一本畅销书之后，然后一个新的代表作，就是打开无路之路4阶段升级策略思维。真的有兴趣的话，在结账的时候再输入我们专属的折扣码，可以在末日期间再折300块给大家。那因为课程里头其实也有提到这个所谓的结构化思考，然后尤其是像 MECE 拆分问题的方法，我觉得在管顾业也是超级常用。然后之前我们几集的来宾也都有提出他们在思考问题的时候也都是用 MECE 在拆解，所以可不可以也让 PO 来详细跟我们讲解一下，就是到底 MECE 是什么，然后你的课程里面会怎么教，还有以及这个金字塔原则，因为我觉得这个都是在管顾业非常常见拆解问题的一个工具。 然后我想说也透过 PO 来让大家认识它，并且来应用它，来提高我们决策思维的品质。
Yeah, so in my daily life, I try to structure the different types of crying into a MECE organization with my daughter. I'm just kidding. MECE is basically a mental model of breaking down information and making your ideas more coherent. The more MECE a set of ideas, the more easy it will be understood by others. So quick example, let's say you have 100 podcasts in Taiwan, and that's all of the podcasts in Taiwan. You could say, and you have the tiles of like the squares of each podcast, and you had them on a wall, and you had 100, you had one for each podcast. That's MECE because the podcasts are all independent and unique entities, and together the 100 are collectively exhaustive. So mutually exclusive means independent, and collectively exhaustive means together they make up the whole set. But that's not very good. Nobody wants to consume a list of 100 podcasts.
Sure.
So what you could do from there is start organizing it into like higher level buckets. And so part of the tool of MECE is figuring out what level to structure the information. So you could say, okay, there are podcasts that have only ever done episodes in Chinese, some that are in English, and then some that have done both languages. And that might give you 3 buckets.
Yeah.
And so you could start visualizing and thinking about the set of information in a different way. You could also do top 25 podcasts by iTunes ranking, all other podcasts. That's another way to sort it. You could sort it by topics or themes. You might have like 6 or 8 categories. And then as you move up the stack, you want to make sure those are MECE too. So you would ask yourself, top 25 and all other podcasts, is that MECE also? And yes, by definition, all other captures the collectively exhaustive set of the remaining. And so you can apply this to anything. Like I was saying before with the hypotheses, you want to come up with a set of hypotheses that are separate, but together make up all the range of possibilities. So if you're trying to grow your podcast to 10,000 people, you want to come up with a set of different questions that all together might make up the total possibility space. But you don't want them overlapping. So you can structure the analyses and make it more clear. So like I was doing before, paid ads partner with other YouTubers. So you could call one paid ads, one organic growth. Organic growth, paid growth.
Yeah.
Then those are MECE because they're 2 different types of growth, organic and paid. You can structure those. They're separate, different analyses, different sort of work streams. There might be some overlap there for sure, but it's like good enough and it makes sense as an executable strategy. So then you would just lead with the answer. This is also part of the pyramid principle as well, but you can reach 10,000 people by investing in organic growth and paid ads. And that's it. And now your analysis might back up how to do that, but that's your takeaway based on you answering the hypotheses to the affirmative. And so you can start to see how you structure information and organize it at the right level. It becomes easier to understand. Versus if I was like, well, you can grow your podcast. One way to do that is via organic growth. You can partner with YouTuber A, you can do this sort of thing with them. You could also do this sort of thing with them. You can also partner with YouTuber B. You could do this with them, though they may not want to do this. And so you start to see how you get lost already. You're like, where is he going? And so you're trying to always anchor people to these categories and the structure and give people a mental map for what you're actually talking about.
所以其实越复杂的问题透过 MECE， 然后要让它拆解下来，又涵盖所有的可能，那它就会让我们的思考可能越来越清晰，而且你可以把分类分得更清楚。所以这件事情也是可能也需要一些练习，还是说我们现在有了这个概念，那到底学了之后应用到生活中的每一个决策是容易的吗？还是它其实也是需要一定程度的练习，才可以越来越让这个思考的脉络这么的清晰？
Yeah, and this is why consultants are annoying to other people in their lives because they're applying this to everything. So that would be my actual advice to people is try applying it to everything. Start noticing things. You'll notice things in the world that are hard to understand, and you'll start understanding why they're hard to understand. Or you'll look at a slide and somebody's listed 6 things, and you see that item number 2 and item 5 are heavily overlapping. And you're like, oh, wow, that could be simplified and make so much more sense.
Okay.
And so as you're doing these things, you can apply it to anything, like the menu for MicMind, right? You could look at like the UX and say like, there's MECE to your business.
Yeah.
In terms of like, you make money in different ways. But then there's MECE to the audience. As a customer, what does the customer care about? And what is the different services that they can quickly look at the menu and see that it's a complete menu? Right? Like McDonald's menu is collectively exhaustive because it's all the items, but the categories probably are mutually exclusive too, right? You have like the dollar menu is separate than like, and it's overlapping, right? Still, because there are things on the dollar menu that are in the value meal, but the dollar menu of items is mutually exclusive from like value meals. And so you can start to see how different things map. Yeah, you can apply this to everything. So I would just practice. And if people in your life get tired of practicing with you, AI.
OK 所以刚刚那个例子我有点豁然开朗感，因为我们在思考我们自己服务项目的时候，以前尤其是最一开始可能是凭感觉，可是从消费的角度应该是要让大家可以一清二楚我们的产品跟服务到底是怎么分类的。所以当今天我们有了这个 sense 之后，我其实就可以回头来思考一下我们公司现在的产品跟服务，如果以 MECE 的法则有没有都涵盖清楚。那当然有些可能细项是可能 overlap 的，但是当我们今天有了这层思考，换一个视角，让消费者可能更理解我们现在有提供的产品或服务，然后也可以让整个的这个思考结构还有这个资讯的脉络变得更加的清晰。
Yeah, so the simple one would be audio podcasting or audio and video podcasting. 2 separate options. The audio is overlapping, but in essence, it's a different service.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. 好，回去改一下我们的那个菜单，改一下我们的服务项目。
That's something I do with a lot of my clients is I'll pull up their company values and I'll say, are these MECE?
Yeah.
And it's confusing for them because a lot of times they're very vague and they're sort of overlapping if they're read literally. But to the company, if people internally do know each of the corporate values as different things with different stories, then it's MECE to the people in the company. It's just all about who is your audience.
所以透过 MECE 还有这个金字塔原则，它可以很有效率的让一个混乱的资讯变得相对的精准，而且可分析，然后所以才会进一步产生更有品质的决策结果。那我不知道这样理解对不对？
Yeah, these are tools. They're not laws of nature or laws of reality. And what I mean by that is you shouldn't over-apply these, right? You're trying to solve business problems, execute in your job, communicate information. You're trying to do better. You're trying to sharpen your thinking. So you're trying to go from, should we eat ramen, yakitori, pho, or luro fan? It's just a random collection of lists. Or should we eat Vietnamese, Japanese, or Korean tonight? Right? And so you can start to notice how certain ways of organizing ideas are way easier to receive and understand. And so we're intelligent beings, but we're not that good at processing and comprehending information, especially when we're communicating to large groups of people. So you have to think about how do you improve your message such that you actually get what you want to happen.
那我们充分的理解，就是从资讯透过 MECE 来协助我们做好决策之外，那刚才也有稍微提到的是那个金字塔原则，所以可不可以来再帮我们解释一下这个金字塔原则我们可以怎么来应用？
Yeah, so pyramid principle works pretty well with MECE. And so I teach these together. MECE also works with the hypothesis generation of like you want to make sure how your hypotheses are MECE. So you might define a problem. You have hypotheses that are hopefully MECE. And then you're going to try to answer those hypotheses with information. Now, that information is going to be slightly different than your hypotheses. And part one of the pyramid principle I teach is turning that information into an insight. So you're answering the hypothesis. And so you have all this information, ideas, knowledge, expertise at the bottom, and you're getting to a sharper, higher level insight. That's the clear information. That's instead of listing out 15 different types of Japanese food, you say Japanese food. That's the insight. And then you get to the higher level, you take together your answers to your hypotheses, which would be your main takeaway or your answer, your recommendation. That's the answer to your problem. And the second part of the pyramid principle says to just start with that answer. And so the problem might be, where do we eat? The hypothesis might be we could eat anywhere in Taipei. You might then generate a list of recommendations and preferences, and then say the insight from that is we should either pick Japanese, Korean, or Thai food. And then the answer is that we should pick from Japanese, Korean, and Thai food. And so that's pretty much it. That's the answer. Instead of saying, well, here are the 25 options we could do, it's this and that. It's like, no, based on our preferences, we should eat at this place. And so you'd want to fine tune that a little more. You might just come up with like one answer or two answers or something like that. Just this process of questions, information, try to get to insights. But in reality, what you're doing is you're going through that process over and over and over again. And so you get to the top of the pyramid and you sort of test and say, does this make sense? Will this convince who we're trying to convince? Or will this make sense to my audience or customer or something like that? If not, you go back and do more information. You process again. You try to make sure things are MECE. You structure it. You tinker with the hypotheses if you have to go through it again. And you just do that over and over and over and over again. And that sounds crazy. And it was when I first started working in consulting at McKinsey. But that is how they get to good work. It's not that they're like hiring super geniuses. They literally have a completely different process and way of working. And so it's that iterative, like, starting with the frameworks and tools and that iteration of going through that process over and over again. And it is exhausting, it is tiring, but once you've created work on the other side of that process, I find it so enjoyable because ideas fit together, it makes sense, it flows, and it feels good.
哇，我觉得这个决策思维的过程，不管是透过金字塔原则，或者还有MECE，它就是一直反复的练习，最终我们会获得很好的决策品质。其实就跟麦肯锡在解决任何复杂的问题。我知道麦肯锡的顾问费都是超级贵，过往服务的公司也都是非常的大，但所以其实 Paul 也是把这一整套思维带出来，应用在可能人生方方面面的决策上，然后从假说啦到金字塔啦，然后到 MECE 啊这些。应用成日常之后，其实很多时候你就会知道哪些是你要做，哪些是你不要做的，因为会把复杂的资讯变得相对的是容易许多。所以大家如果对于 Paul 的课程有兴趣的话，可以再参考我们节目的资讯栏的连结。那在结账的时候输入专属的折扣码，会有在300块的优惠会送给大家，也感谢 PPA 这次的合作。那最后呢，我想要问几个我自己也很感兴趣的话题，就是因为Paul 当初就是从麦肯锡离开之后嘛，然后开始可能类似数位游牧的工作，然后在世界各地很多地方，然后最后选择来台湾。所以第一个为什么会选择来台湾？第二个是如何认识老婆，然后就是在台湾认识的老婆，并且结婚生小孩的。
I decided to settle in Taiwan because I met my wife here.
Sure.
So I quit my job for about a year, was doing the freelancing like I talked about, knew I didn't want that path. And at that point, I decided I would just do the opposite of everything I did in my 20s, which was abandon a plan, do things that made sense, just go do the opposite, literally go to the opposite side of the world. So I took a 1-month trip to Asia. I took a week-long trip to Taipei to visit a friend. For some reason, just felt so pulled to the city. I still don't know why. It was just, I felt it, and I got back to the US and I just decided I'm going to move to Taiwan for 2 months.
Okay.
And then do the nomad thing after that.
Mm-hmm.
So over the next 4 months, I sold all my stuff in the US. I moved out of my Boston apartment, booked a flight, and put all my possessions in 1.5 suitcases and basically came to Taiwan without a plan. When I had visited Taiwan that April, I had matched with my wife on Tinder, but we never met.
Oh.
And I didn't meet anyone else. And when I went back to the US, I decided I would stop using dating apps and give up on dating. Because I was never going to meet anyone. Who's going to want to date me? I have no plan. I have no income. Came to Taiwan for a month. And a month into that trip, she popped into my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I texted her the next day. And we met up like a day later. And that pretty much just changed everything. Because I met her as she was quitting her job.
Okay.
And embarking on her own pathless path. And we traveled a bit together. I moved back to Taiwan with her, and we've been back and forth all over with US and Taiwan as home bases for the last 8 years now.
人生就是充满着各种意外跟惊喜啊。
Quit your job and find a wife. That is the promise of the pathless path.
OK， 对啊，所以我觉得这也是为什么无路之路这么的重要，因为很多时候你人生重要的惊喜跟收获还有礼物，都是你从来没有想象过的。
Yeah, I think the biggest lessons I've learned over the last 9 years have been I need to create more space in my life to open myself up to serendipity and for good things to happen. When I was overly planning life, I constrained my possibilities and I constrained my own imagination for what I was capable of. And I'm still unlearning this lesson and guided with like hypothesis driven thinking, but it's still such a wonderful journey because I don't know what's going to happen next. I have no plan. People keep asking me, and it's like, why would you think I'm going to suddenly figure out what I'm doing? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know, and that's okay.
OK， 对啊，所以我觉得，当对于我们的世界充满着未知跟好奇，其实很多惊喜跟收获就随之而来。所以其实回到 Paul 的这一路以来的这个心路历程，当然最早就是有着人人称羡的梦幻工作，薪水也非常的高，但这些都是别人定义的成功。可是当你把人生的自主权、人生的选择权找回来的时候，其实你的人生会变得更加的快乐，更多的可能性，而且会每天都活得很开心跟很兴奋。那最后一个我想要问的问题呢，就是Paul 到现在可能你这辈子收过最好的财务建议是什么呢？
The best financial advice was probably reading A Random Walk Down Wall Street when I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's basically a book about dollar cost averaging and continuous buying and never selling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically what I did. I've done my whole life, and I think I've always been a frugal person, so that paired well with me. But yeah, I think more people should just know about passive investing and basically continuous investing and the power of compounding. Like Taiwan sometimes, like it's crazed with like get rich quick schemes and hot stock tips. It's like literally just dollar cost average into index funds and you will not have to do any work toward like building wealth. I think that's the best. My best use of money, though, was to like spend my money on buying time to find myself.
OK， 哇，我觉得很棒的建议。
That was not wealth building. That was wealth destroying, but life affirming.
OK， 真的是最后一个问题了，就是影响Paul人生最深的3个观念或是价值观是什么呢？
I have so many influences. I think The idea of the pathless path I discovered from a writer, David White. He's one of my favorite writers. And the pathless path is not my term. It's a term that's been used in, I think, Taoism and Buddhism for a long time. And so his language, though, and his writing was incredibly powerful for me early in my path because I found that phrase. It was like a deep relief learning this phrase. It was a very powerful experience reading that, but also his like poetic prose was just, it sort of gave me a portal to a different way of seeing the world. That was incredibly powerful. There's so many books I've been influenced by. There's so many people in my life I've been inspired by. I think even just conversations like this, the fact that I get to engage with people on ideas and think about what is the good life, what is possible in life, I feel like I'm the most blessed person in the world. It's what I love doing. I love engaging with people, and my books being out in the world, it brings people to me with curious questions and interesting lives. And yeah, I love being part of that bigger conversation with reality.
所以这些重要的对话就变成你人生很重要的一些事情，然后这也是我们自己做访谈最喜欢的事情，因为每一个访谈我们都在跟来宾学习，然后学习他的观念，学习他的观点，学习他的价值观，他的人生故事，那或多或少都会给我们人生带来莫大的启发，很多时候也会帮很多人少走了冤枉路。所以今天从 Paul 的故事我们会看到，从最一开始是人人称羡的梦幻工作，然后世俗眼里成功的那个样子，然后到后来开始走上一个自我觉醒、自我探索的一个过程，然后也很莫名其妙的就来到了台湾，然后找到了老婆，然后命定了台湾，然后也出了一本畅销书，然后现在又准备要出了一本畅销课程在 PPA 上面，所以我觉得这些故事上其实都给我们很大启发，就是其实人生的成功不应该由别人来定义，而是由我们自己决定我们想要成为什么样子的人。所以这个对我的解读来是从以前我们可能是向外拿成功的资源，可是换一个角度来变成是我们掌握了我们人生的自主权，我们定义我们想要的人生是什么样子，然后我们花了大量的时间去探索，然后走出一条属于自己的路。那因为未知跟无路之路才是我们活在这个世界上最有趣好玩的事情，尤其像刚才讲到的，我跟一个陌生人或是跟一个人产生的一个对话，这个过程就让你充满着惊喜跟开心，甚至是成就。所以我觉得今天从 Paul 的这一整个分享都给我们很大的启发。那当然，如果大家对于这个 Paul 新的这个课程，这个4阶段升级策略思维有兴趣的话呢，就可以再参考我们节目资讯的连结。那在结账的时候呢，输入专属的优惠码。那今天呢，就再次感谢 Paul 来我们节目的分享。那如果你喜欢的节目呢，也别忘了订阅及追踪。我们就下集节目见，大家拜拜，
拜拜。
如果你喜欢今天的访谈，欢迎分享给你身边的朋友，也别忘了按赞订阅查理的创业化合物。只要你的动动小手，就可以让我们更有底气去邀请更多厉害的来宾，分享更多厉害的观点哦。